I can see it's live now.
Okay.
Can you check? Yeah? Okay.
Is it recording?
No one's...
The dot next to it. Yeah, it's recording. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and get started then.
Okay.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
All right, everyone can see?
You cannot see it. Try reshare it.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Hold on. Screen two. It's big. Can you see now?
Can you see it? Still no?
Can you see she?
I can see it.
You see?
Oh, maybe try to go to your live, because there's a right thing around your camera now. So maybe you need to move the video focus to the screen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's not letting me do that though.
Yeah.
Just 1 second here. Yeah, it's saying I can share my desktop here. Okay, can you see? You should be able to see this because I can see it. Okay.
Can you see it, Ayla? Nope. No. Still see you. I can see it. For some reason, I can see it, but Alam cannot see it.
That's weird. Okay.
Do you want me to try it?
Try to share. See if I can see.
1 second. I'm gonna open it first. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
No, still not from Alam's side.
Hold on now. Send live. Okay, you should be able to see it now.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
you do what you just did because I was able to send that content from live here.
Oh, okay. Here?
Yeah, do you see now?
I'm not. And now Alam cannot see my video. Screen is on? It's a lag? Is that because of the lag? Okay. Oh. So now they can see this thing from my screen share, but they cannot see my videos.
Okay. Trying to figure that out here.
Yeah.
Okay, so add video below. Okay. Okay, so I've got you in it now, She.
Okay, can you see it? I think he is saying both of us can be seen and the screen share is working. That's from your side. Everything is working now,
Yeah.
Jaden?
I can't see myself on this, but I think what we're seeing here is just the content and then one presenter.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, now I can see. Yes,
Okay.
Yes, true.
Okay, cool. So if we're ready to get started then, good afternoon and thank you for joining BraunWeiss TeamTalks, our informational webinar and Q&A hosted by BraunWeiss Management Consulting Group. At BraunWeiss, we specialize in optimizing finance and accounting operations, CFO and controller advisory, digital transformation, and management consulting. We were founded in 2014 and are located in the greater Boston area. Today's seminar of remote client management tactics will be presented by Shishin, our strategy and operation analyst. During the past 3 months of quarantine, she has excelled at managing our clients and their operational tasks remotely.
Hi, thank you for having me. So today I want to talk about how to connect with your client remotely, especially during this pandemic time, and also how to collaborate with your client efficiently.
Cool, thank you for that, Shi. Before we get started, I have a quick question for you. What are the advantages and disadvantages of remote client management versus in-person client management?
That's a great question to start. So what I would say, that's based on my observation from the past 3 months, is obviously if we are working remote, no one is actually traveling. So both us and our client is having a flexible time schedule to schedule for a meeting. So for us, it's easier for us to have meeting with our clients since we don't need to go to client's office. And for client, it's easier to have a meeting with us from home. And another thing I experience a lot with my client is a better record management system. Since a lot of things are done by online and clients are sending the document to us through emails or SharePoint, so we no longer need to spend a lot of time just to reform the document into electronic version or have it as online editable version. And of course, there are gonna be some disadvantage. So we used to have a lot of face-to-face opportunity with our client, but now even though we have phone calls or message or video conferencing, it's not the same as we have the opportunity with our client since we are missing out all the face-to-face interaction with them.
Okay, awesome. Let's go ahead and get started then.
Yeah, so this is some of the main point I want to talk about in today's webinar, mainly how to improve the communication with your client and how to manage their record remotely and how to establish clear process outline for your client. And so those are the 3 things that is super important when you are not having that face-to-face opportunity with our client, since everything can be only done by email communication, meetings, or phone calls for instant message. And let's get into the client communication part. Before we get into each of the communication techniques I want to talk about, I want to first talk about how to set the direction of the communication process. Before we get into actually communicate with our client, as every business analyst do, we always need to analyze our client and their business on a daily basis to understand how they're doing on a daily basis and what their major operation tasks are is super important for us. In this way, we can gradually understand their priorities throughout the time and their concerns, especially during the COVID situation. For example, for one of my clients, the client focuses on account receivable a lot. So before the client even asks, we will have the report ready for the client. And also every time if we have some customer communication with their customers, we will always keep the client in the loop. So they don't need to worry about asking us every day on how the things are going. And the next thing I want to talk about is the many ways that we can connect with our client during remote time. So before I talk about meetings and email communication, I want to first say a few words about instant message and phone call. So I know phone call and instant message is always the easiest and instant way to talk with a client. But personally, based on my experience with my client, it's not a good way to communicate with them. So the reason is it's hard to keep track of the information during this loop because sometimes you will lose some of the information sent by messages due to either system crash or some technical issue. And if you are having a phone call with your client, it's hard to keep track all the notes you have. And in the future, if you forget something, it's hard for you to go back to the written document to refer to the information you need. And the next two things I want to talk about is client meeting and email communication, which I will show in details in the next slide.
Excellent, thank you. Before we move on here, I have received a question from Camila on our team. She asked, what if my client is having difficulty transitioning to remote collaboration?
Yeah, this actually happened, the exact same situation happened with one of my clients, and she is having some technical issue on the software we are using on a daily basis, and also she has some confusion while we are doing their account receivables. So for this, we were always flexible to jump into a quick phone call if they have small confusion like this. And I remember last time when she had the confusion, we actually jumped into a phone call for 5 minutes to explain everything to her. And after 5 minutes, she understands all the things and everything is clears out. So I would say use video conferencing, phone calls to explain small things or details in with your client. And if they are having some sort of technical issue, you can always prepare a document for step-by-step instruction. So if they want to know how to set up their account in QuickBooks, you can always prepare a document for them to ask them follow the step-by-step instructions.
Awesome, thank you for that sheet.
So the next thing I want to talk about is online meetings. In order to have an interactive and detailed communication with our client during the meeting, there is a lot of tips and preparation we need to do. So the first thing is to prepare for the meeting. So personally, I will always discuss with my colleague and turn it into an internal meeting with them before the client meeting. So in this way, we can prepare all the meeting topic and meeting agenda in advance. And we will always send a copy of the meeting agenda to our client. So they will also be aware what kind of things we will be talking about in the meeting. So another thing is to set up their expectation by having a regular recurring meeting with your client, so they will know how to digest the task for us and how we are finishing those tasks on a monthly basis. And the next thing is the important part, which is going to actually get into the meeting. So personally, I found it's helpful if we have at least one dedicated person to take all the notes. So in this case, we will not miss any of the important things the client said, and we will not waste our time with client to have long email stream just for the same thing that we have already discussed in our meetings. And for us, meeting is always a good opportunity to raise clients' attention on non-crucial items and iron down all the details about action items. For some of my clients, sometimes they are busy with their customers, so they are not really paying attention to all the emails we sent. So we will always group those things together in our online meeting, so they will be aware of all the action items from their side. And just like I discussed before, make use of Microsoft Teams function like screen share or video recording. So for video recording, what we do is to record the whole meeting with the client, so we will not miss any of the important things they say. And if we need to show the client something important, or we need to walk them through some process, we will use the screen share function in the Teams. And after the whole meeting and all the preparation for the meeting, before we finishing up, it's also super helpful for us to organize and share the meeting notes or action items or next step with our client. So in this case, they will also be aware of all the things they have to do from their side. And if we have meeting agendas, we will have the opportunity to get them the reference about the project status.
Excellent, thank you. Before we move on here, I wanted to open the floor up for any questions that we have from the team or anyone who's attending. So it looks like I have received a message from Roberto. He asked, how can we make sure that we don't lose the benefits of face-to-face interactions?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just like what I said before, is we no longer have the face-to-face interaction with our client. But one thing I found important, just like what I have in the slides, is always to get prepared for a meeting with a client and save their time not to talk too much in the meetings. And for important things like video recording the whole meeting, take notes during the meeting, and send their action items after the meeting. And for their reference is always important.
Excellent, thank you for that. I also have a question myself, and that is, what are some of the best practices for preparing for virtual client meetings?
Yeah, so some of the best practice is always, just like I said, having an internal meeting first. So maybe different people are working on the same project, so they'll always have different approach on the same project. So having an internal meeting to discuss all the things or either problems or topic or confusion each of the team member have is very important. So in this case, we will finish up everything maybe in 30 minutes or 1 hour while we are meeting with the client.
All right, thank you for that.
So the next thing I want to talk about is email communication, since we definitely do this on a daily basis. In order to have a concise and structured email, there's a lot of things we need to do from our side. So what we do for our client, and most of our client is getting used to this approach, is to have a email distribution list. So they don't need to remember all the names or the spelling of the emails of each of the team member while they are working with us. So for most of our clients, they have quicker emails if we have one email distribution list for them. So every time they send some email to us, we will always have all the team members get notified from that distribution list. And another thing we found helpful is acknowledgement to our client. So not only giving them feedback on time is important, also, but even if we cannot get instant feedback for our client, acknowledgement to our client is important. So I would say keep at least one point of contact person just to reply to the client's email saying, we have received this, we will get back to you on early next week or end of this week, etc. The next thing I want to talk about is how to write your emails. So the first and most important thing is only include essential information in your email, and never get your client overwhelmed. No one likes to read an email that is 10 paragraphs long. So it's better if we have a system that we can only include one paragraph for all the information we need to ask for the client. And in order to have a clear email structure, we can always make use of all the functions in the email. For example, tables for action items, list for all your questions, or attachment for important document, or even screenshot if you have small things to say to your client. And personally, based on my experience, if we have highlighted or bold the important keywords in the emails, we can always get the client to reply to us quicker because they can see all the keywords at the first glance, and it's helpful for them to get to the key point. And if we have attachment, this is also based on my personal experience with our client. If the client is having different version of Microsoft Word or Excel, sometimes if we send the file to them, the system will pop up an arrow saying the version is not matched. So we will always try to only include PDF file for attachments to avoid all the format errors. And if we have multiple attachments in the same email, be sure to label them according to the email. So if you mention document ABC in your email, be sure to name them the exact same way in your attachments. And one more thing I personally like to do before I send the email to the client is to check the client one more time from client's perspective. Imagine you are the one reading this email. How long will it take you to read through the email and to get the key point? If that's too long, something is not right. You need to go back to your email and modify something there. And after all the things is done, don't think this is the end. We still need to follow up with our client or send email reminders to them if they are not providing the feedbacks on time.
Awesome, thank you for that. So I'm going to leave it open for any questions from the team here. It looks like I have received a question on communication from Ariel. She asked, if the client is not responding to our emails or messages, how do we handle this and what should be our next step?
Yeah, so we experienced a lot for one of my clients, but so personally, I would say make sure that you didn't do anything wrong or you didn't miss out anything from your side. Try to send multiple email reminders or even messages or phone calls to your client. If they are still not replying, there's basically nothing you can do. Personally, I will raise this thing to my manager, so my manager will try to contact the client one more time for those action items. And since we have already documented all the things, for example, email streams or messages on our side, even if the client come back to us, we have all the things under our records, so that we can show the client saying we have already done all the things from our side.
Excellent, thank you for that.
Yeah. So the next thing I want to talk about is record management, since most of the documents are now submitted from online. So at BraunWeiss, what we use is SharePoint, which is one of the most famous cloud-based record management and storage system, just like Google Drive and OneDrive. So one of the advantages is they have enough storage system for everything. So what we found very helpful is always to store those emails and email copies along with the document we received from the client. So every time if we forget something, we don't need to go back to our inbox for searching. We can always use SharePoint as our reference. And another thing is the advantage of collaboration. So if your client is working with your team members on the same document, SharePoint can save a lot of the version and long email stream, since they can use the same link, the same document to work on it. So everyone can add their edits or comments into the same document. So we will not be ended up having 10 exact same document with 10 different versions. In order to have a good managed SharePoint, I would say there are some important parts to have a clear structure of record management. So since client will also get access to the SharePoint, so we will always try to label those folders by their importance. Just like what I talked about for one of my client, the client is focused on account receivable, so we will have one dedicated folder for account receivable on the front page. So every time the client log into the SharePoint, they can directly see the things they need. And another thing is always to keep your folder or document name by the keywords. So we should not have any vague or misleading misleading names of the document. And I also want to talk about version control. So I know SharePoint have a function that we use for a lot of our clients is a check-in and checkout system. So every time only one person can work on the document, and we have a report to track down how all the edits made by each of the person work on this document. And the next thing I want to talk about is based on our experience with the client is to have one special folder for the document upload from their side. So before that, we used a lot of emails where we have linked to each of the folder on SharePoint, which is kind of confusing and misleading for the client and also wasting their time. So we improved the whole process by having one dedicated folder for all the uploads for their documents. So we will also enable the notification for the folder. So every time the client sends something, upload something into the folder, we will get notified. And also we have another approach for our client is to use the web forms. By web forms, I mean Microsoft Forms, Google Forms. So every time if they have some information that need to upload to our site, we can always ask them to go to the Microsoft form to fill it out, just like filling a survey. And after they fill out the survey, the results will come into our SharePoint in a database structure. So we can see all the things in the background and manage them through our SharePoint, which the client will also have access to. So they will see a clear structure of all the information they submitted to our site.
I'm going to leave the floor open for a quick second if anyone has any questions. So I just received a question here from Camila. She asked, how often should I check in with clients to ensure the successful completion of a project?
Yeah, so personally, based on my experience with our client, it always depends on the urgency of the task. So if it is a super urgent thing or it has a strict deadline attached to it, it's always good to set a second reminder later the same day. For example, if I send an email to the client in the morning, it's better to have a second reminder in the afternoon. And if it is not that urgent or the deadline is still in the next week or still far away, I would suggest to send one reminder each of the following day. So the second reminder should be out on the second day, etc., etc. And in this way, they will still have being the same in the loop, and the client will be reminded each of the day when they are getting into their desk. And if that is something that is not considered crucial or not urgent, I would suggest to leave those things and group them together in the client meeting. Just as I discussed before, we always have a client meeting, a regular client meeting, each of the months or each of the quarter. So for those non-crucial things, we can group them together into the meeting and iron down the details from there.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, so the next thing I want to talk about is process outline for your projects. So even sometimes client will always send their requests through emails on a daily basis, and as a team, we should provide clear time frame to the clients. Just like what I discussed, along with your acknowledgement of receiving the emails, it's better if you can provide the client with a clear time frame. For example, we can get back to you on this by end of this week or early next week, so they don't need to keep pushing us about the same thing since we have already gave them the deadline. And another good important thing is since we have a good understanding of their business, so we can digest and set up priorities based on the request from the clients. So every time if something is pretty urgent, we can set that as top priorities. And if we need clients' feedback on those, we can always send them follow-ups emails with that. And since most of the things are done by emails, to have clear deadline like this through the emails is important. And another thing I want to talk about here is to have email reminders for recurring tasks. For example, for one of my client, by the end of each month, we need to remind for the important document uploads. So we will set up email reminders in our Outlook for each of the end of the month. So every time the email will just go out to the client, so they will be reminded for action items from their side. And another thing I found important in the SharePoint, one of their function is the SharePoint calendar. So we do this for all of our clients. So in each of their SharePoint, what they can see is a calendar for all the recurring tasks we do on a monthly basis. And they can see all the details there. For example, if we need to send out all the invoices by end of this week, we will have a dedicated task on the calendar with all the details and how many we need to send and when is the deadline, and if there anything special things we need to notice. Everything they can see from the calendar. So even if they are not asking us to finish this or finish that, they can directly see all the tasks that happens in the background through the calendar.
Awesome, thank you. So while you were speaking, I had received a question from Roberto on our team. He asked, how do I express urgency to a client virtually?
Yeah, so I would say first send out multiple reminders or follow up to your clients to indicate this is an important thing to do. So for example, if something we need that by end of this week, we will send multiple reminders throughout the day to remind them to provide feedback to us. And another thing I will say is to make use of Outlook functions. So I'm pretty sure in Outlook we have the option to label the email as high importance or label it as action items. So by the time client receive the email, they can see a red label there that drawing their attention to that email. And another thing is to have good email subtitles. Email title. So what I do is if we need some instant feedback from the client, I always have words like action items, action required in the email title. So even though they are not opening the email, they can know that it is urgent from our side.
Great, thank you.
So let me just give you guys a brief conclusion on this. Just like a lot of the big companies like Twitter, Facebook, they are always trying to move everyone working from home. Working with a client remotely is a new norm now. More and more client communication and collaboration will definitely be online. So therefore, it has become more and more important for us to know our toolbox and have a better approach to improve the efficiency of the communication with our client.
Awesome. Thank you for this presentation, Shi. Before we wrap up here, I have a couple of outstanding questions that I've received from our team. First one is from Alam. She asked, which form of client management do you prefer, remote or in person?
Well, I would say remote since everyone is getting more flexible, and it's always to have a good. It's always a good thing to have everyone flexible since it's easier to get in touch with our client, and it's easier to have a meeting with our client. And I would like to say the disadvantage to lose the face-to-face interaction is not that important since we every time we have the client meeting, we'll have our camera open. So it's kind of like the similar experience from client side that we are still talking to them face-to-face.
Excellent. And I have one other question as well. Based on your professional experience and the last few months where you've really excelled with this remote client management, what applications would you recommend for someone starting out with remote client management?
Mm-hmm. Since we are a remote client management, so everything should be at least as convenient as possible. So at BraunWeiss now we are using Microsoft apps. What I mean is Outlook, Microsoft Teams, or SharePoint, and the most important one is must to be SharePoint and emails. So no matter it's Outlook or Gmail, to have a clean structure of emails and good efficient email communication with your client is always important. And to have cloud-based management tool like SharePoint is also important since it reduces the human error opportunities. So it will always have the same link for each of the document in the SharePoint, and it's also very secure on the SharePoint.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. We really look forward to, when you host your next seminar and everything. And thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.